Another massive piece to South Carolina is retained for the 2026 season. We're not just talking about Torian Gray, but we will talk about that. One of the key defensive players outside of Dylan Stewart announcing he will return for 2026. We talk about that. We talk about Torian Gray again. And basketball gets a big win as they close out non-conference play before SEC play begins this Saturday. Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked on Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? I am your host, Chris Marler, and host of the Locked on Gamecocks podcast, part of the Locked on Sports Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in America. Thanks to you guys. We've got another good show for you today as we close out the year. We only have 2 days left in 2020. I almost said 2023. Jesus. We are back though for the December 30th episode. We got a lot to talk about, so it should be a pretty quick show. I'm excited to talk about it. I hope you guys are having a great closeout to your year. We are brought to you today by our friends at Game Time and the Game Time app. Listen, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Make that first purchase in 2026, not 2023, like I was talking about like an idiot. Let's get into it. So the announcement was made earlier today that another key piece to the South Carolina defense from this past season is going to stay home. And this is what's more shocking than anything, guys. It's not that he announced that he's staying. It's that I can say this name correctly. And that is Justin Okoronkwo, the German player that I raved about all offseason. Former Alabama transfer came in. I've told you the story a bazillion times. I'll say it again. Guy that when I remember talking to the staff over at Alabama when they first recruited him out of Germany, 3-star recruit. No one knew much about him, but built like an absolute unit, 6'2", 230. Every single time I saw him play this year, it felt like he was shot out of a cannon. Fantastic in open space. I still think from a ceiling standpoint, Fred Johnson, J.R. Johnson, is going to be the best of that group. I still think he's got a little bit to go in developing. But as a overall production and playmaking standpoint this year, it felt like Okaroko was your best linebacker. And I don't think that was it's not an indictment or anything negative on other players. It just seemed like that's exactly what happened. So a big get. Now, this is a guy that will be going into, I believe, his 4th year in college, and was, again, very, very big for this team this past season. A guy that you got out of the portal, and this was a year for the portal for South Carolina where you just kind of missed on, not like that. I wouldn't say, well, you did miss. You missed out offensively, but this was another case where it's like there were some guys you brought in that did not live up to what you hoped they would live up to. This was not one of them, for one, but it does feel like, whereas in the past we were able to talk about some of these portal gets that South Carolina had, and it felt like offensively or defensively, they more often than not ended up being a really, really good acquisition that you developed and got way more bang for your buck, way more value than what you probably spent to your team. Now, like Rocket Sanders was one of those guys, right? I look at this year, Rocket Sanders gone. You saw what you brought in at the running back position and what the production was from him. It's not anything negative about that player. I think the main takeaway I have now is I still think you can have this narrative in play for South Carolina in terms of they do a really good job of developing talent, and that's really big for anyone entering the portal and wanting to come to play in the SEC for a program that's trying to take the next step and be elite. I just think it's on the defense side of the ball, and this is that was the most long-winded way to phrase it, but like I just think it's on the defensive side of the ball. This is a guy that came to you, like I said, and was very, very lost in the mix, and probably would have played this year for Alabama, but not started. And he started right away for South Carolina, and the impact was instant. On the season, he had 64 tackles. That was tied for the most of anyone on the team. Again, J.R. Johnson, Fred Johnson, that was a guy that also had he had 61, I believe, had an interception, 40 solo tackles, was very, very sure and fundamentally sound. 4 tackles for loss. I don't think he had a sack. No, had a couple QB hurries and a pass broken up. But this is a guy that I think that when we saw at the beginning of the year, and I remember saying this to some of y'all, everyone's was like Fred Johnson, I think we all thought was going to be pretty good. The size is undeniable. He is an NFL linebacker in size. People were very impressed with Sean Murphy, and he has a background of being a top 100 recruit, former 4-star, also a guy that went to Bama, then he went to Florida State. But I remember talking to some people around Florida State, and it was a very disappointing year he spent there, or year or two he spent there, and it didn't ever feel like he was a guy. Not that he had a bad season, but it felt like he was not the same linebacker as this. Having Okoronkwo back, who is a sophomore but will be entering his 4th year, that is, now you've got another one at another level because you have Stewart. You know you're going to try to go get another player in the portal at the edge position. You have some pieces that you like coming back in the defensive line, interior defensive line. You're already going to get, I believe Murphy is back for another year. I should double check that. But then Johnson does come back, and you've already got some high level recruits at that position as well. I personally think this is yet another person that is going to be overlooked by a lot of people when it comes to retaining talent. Like, part of that is the bells and whistles of all this too, where it's like, oh my gosh, like, who are we going to get in the portal? Who are we going to go from this? Who do we have in the recruiting classes? Former 4-stars, 5-stars, all like, we are just human nature. We love bright, new, shiny things. I have ADD. I can tell you that for 1,000% to be true. But like human nature, you want the next big, brightest thing. This is such a solid piece you have coming back. Like it's just such a solid piece you have coming back to where it's like, I think it's really cool to be in situations, especially for a program like South Carolina. And I'll say this as somebody that has to build content in the offseason, especially where it's really fun to look forward to. Oh my gosh, what if this player turns out to be this? Like, what if this player turns out to be, the next blah, 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 and all the offseason low-hanging fruit content ideas and things that we talk about that are just, for the most part, hypothetical. And some of it's to pass the time. Like, it's a lot of fun to talk about what if this happens and what if this player turns out to be this good? What if all these different pieces? What about the new guy that you brought in? The unknown and the hypothetical of the unknown is a lot of fun to talk about and imagine and all those things. You know what's even more fun, especially if you're Shane Beamer trying to keep your job? Not having a question mark. Being able to say, oh my God, yeah. So one of the things that has been a very, very stable piece of this defense, the guy that plays in the middle of it, Justin Okoronkwo, 6'4" or 6'3", 230 pounds, runs like a deer, sideline to sideline, 40 solo tackles, was tied for the team lead in tackles. That guy, he's coming back. And then, oh, by the way, the guy next to him, Fred J.R. Johnson, is going into year 3, former 4-star recruit, built like an NFL linebacker already, also was one of the leading tacklers on the team. Now you have something to build around. And I'll tell you what it looks like, guys, is it looks like a lot like that linebacker unit you had in 2024 when you had Debo Williams and you had, all these other new pieces and some returning pieces where you were like, I don't know how they're going to mesh because you're going to have to go get somebody from the portal most likely, but it's not a position of need for you because you have a core of backers that I personally think from a talent standpoint, one, is a top 5 unit in this league. It's also, from a production standpoint, I believe a top 5 talent in this league. And now you get to look at it from the hypothetical part of it and say, man, what if they only get better, which you would expect them to do? Because both of them were going into year 1 as a starter at the collegiate level in the toughest conference in the country. A massive, massive retainment piece. I don't think it was in question that he was going to go anywhere, but it's like you had all these big storylines that came out about here's Dylan Stewart saying, Lenore Sellers is staying. Oh, by the way, Nick Harbor's going to come back. Here's all these little pieces that are coming back. And now you're getting to sit here and say, oh my God, Matthew Fuller's going to stay. We kept Torian Gray. And then also, arguably our best linebacker on the team is coming back as well. And now it's like, were you in danger of losing him? I don't know. I don't know what the interest was for him from other teams. I do know you don't have to worry about it. And it's one less question mark you have in the offseason and one less question mark you have going into the portal opening in just 3 days. One of the names I mentioned from our retainment piece, we're going to talk about again, the Torian Gray stuff, and then we're also going to talk a little bit of basketball when we come back as well. The Torian Gray thing continues to be something I think that is the biggest piece of the puzzle, that when we look back next year of what was the big win for this off season, it might be retaining him, and I'll tell you why. Locked In Gamecocks continues right for this. All right, welcome back in. Before we get started in the next part of the show, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Game Time. You guys have heard me talk about Game Time before, and now is the best time of the year, honestly, to use them, because it's not just football tickets, it's also basketball games, it's also baseball games coming up, and everything in between. But listen, there's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all is always a lot of fun. The energy, the bands, the moments that make you so excited, nostalgic, and everything in between is a blessing, and it's why we love college football season almost more than any other time of year. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be pretty frustrating. Long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I told you guys this last year. I've used Game Time. The first time I used them was for a Creed concert, and it was awesome. Used them last year to go to a South Carolina basketball game, which was great. Used them again this year to get my fiance and her friends tickets to the LSU South Carolina game here in Baton Rouge, and that was a blast as well. So I cannot recommend Game Time enough. They have options that are unlike any other ticketing option and ticketing company out there. They also do a better job of the customer service side of it than anyone else as well. So if you are looking for tickets, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right. Let's continue this talk about retainment. And I brought this up on the show yesterday, and I wanted to dive more into it today. And that's this. The Torian Gray piece, where you were able to keep a defensive backs coach and one that's been really good for you, right? We all know that. Defensive backs coach. You promote him to co-defensive coordinator. And if I'm being honest, I don't know what that means. Like I don't know if that means. Now, I brought this up yesterday, and I'm biased, but I still think it's a good point. Looking at this through the lens of, if Torian Gray was being hired by South Carolina as their defensive coordinator, if he had to be if Clayton White had to be replaced. If Clayton White had to be replaced, I think he would have been the guy. Remember, Clayton White had interest from a couple of different places at the G5 level, talking about, I think he had a couple of interviews, at least some interest from potential head coaching jobs. I guarantee you, with the amount of turnover that was happening, he took some phone calls from bigger schools around the country. And you think about like Oregon needing a new DC, Tennessee needing a new DC. Like, this is a copycat league, a lot like the NFL, and in the SEC especially. There's a reason why Will Muschamp is getting his 7th job in this conference, going to be the DC at Texas again. There's just no reason to think that with all the turnover that's happened, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, that there wasn't phone calls being made to Clayton White. And if that was the case, I would almost guarantee you, now this is purely speculation, but I would almost guarantee you Torian Gray was the guy that was going to fill in. What he's done for you has been, it's hard to explain, because he's not just a defensive backs coach and teaches the secondary and teaches cornerbacks alone or safeties. A lot of places now have coaches for both, which is wild. But being able to coach safeties, nickelbacks, cornerbacks all in one, and do so at such a high level, we all know how big of a key piece he has been to the coaching staff. I would argue he is the 3rd most important piece on this team from a staff standpoint, and that's Beamer, Clayton White, and then Gray. I would also argue he's probably done the 3rd best job. Oh, maybe even the 2nd best if you want to get mad about Beamer about some stuff. I mean, behind Clayton White, there are a few things that have been less of a question mark than him, and that's secondary. I say all that to say, having to bring someone new in, if you brought him in to replace him, there are so many reasons to get excited about it. And there are so many reasons to like, oh man, this is a really good hire. Here's why. There's a reason why James Franklin made him one of his first phone calls at Virginia Tech, especially since he played there. So I think that if you look at it through a lens of that and where our excitement level would be if he was the next defensive coordinator, and I mean even outside the lens of, oh my God, we lost Clayton White, how are we going to replace him? I just mean if you're in a place to replace, or you're in a place where you need to replace a subpar coordinator, kind of like you did with the offense, him coming in would be something we would all look at with excitement because there's a track record there, there's a resume there, there's a lot to like. And from a recruitment, development, all that kind of standpoint, there's just so much to like from him. Now, the other way to look at this is a way that I don't think is being talked about enough, but it's something that has been so crucial to Shane Beamer and his success when he's had it here, and that's continuity. That's continuity. Like, just break for a second. Just peel behind the onion. If it feels like I'm all over the place, it is that because our neighbors are lighting off fireworks right now, and it sounds like they keep hitting the fence, and I keep thinking someone's knocking at the door. We're back. But so back to what I was saying about Torian Gray. I think that him staying in that retention piece is really big for a number of reasons, because I think if you're Shane Beamer, what he really has proven to like is going into a Monday morning meeting room and seeing a lot of familiar faces. Like Beamer has not shown that he really likes to make a lot of changes on the coaching staff. And like, I think that you could easily make the point that that's been to a fault, and it's kind of hampered this team at times and the program and the development in general. I also think it's something that's admirable to an extent. Beamer has been very, very loyal to a lot of his players and a lot of his coaches. I also think that in this year where he knows, hey, there's changes that have to be made, like bottom line. And so that has to happen. And I think that there are several places that need change. This is not one of them. And now when you go into your meeting rooms and you see some new faces that you're not familiar with that I think can help you win more than the people they're replacing, it's nice to have this, look at this and say, man, we needed to make three new hires out of necessity and desperation, really, an offensive coordinator. I'm so glad we didn't have to make another hire at the defensive backs coach. And I think they would have found someone, but you have to once again give him credit for having to deal with the phone call and saying, hey, Virginia Tech came in, they offered this amount, they want to make me defensive coordinator. I guarantee it wasn't under $1 million. Bump his pay from $850 to $1 million right away, change in title, co-defensive coordinator, do the things that make him want to stay. And I bet you, like the way they moved so fluently, not fluently, sorry, not the right word. Quickly is the word I was looking for. The way they move so quickly with that, a lot similar to the way that my tough day with the words. Very similarly to how they did with the defensive ends and outside linebackers position, and that staff, like position that you needed to fill. They did it very quickly, and they did it without hesitation, which I think says a lot about the confidence that Beamer has in some of the decisions he's making for the first time in a while, and also how much of a necessity it is to keep Torian Gray. Torian Gray could have gone and made a name for himself at his alma mater, being the defensive coordinator there. Torian Gray chose to stay in Columbia, South Carolina, and continue to serve in the role that he's in for a defense that is clearly better when he's around. And let's just be very brutally honest, for a head coach that needs him probably more than Torian Gray needs Shane Beamer. And that's not a shot at Beamer. That is just Beamer's success this year. This team's success this year is so, I think, hinges so much more on Torian Gray being here than another new face that you're having to replace. Again, this is not something that Beamer has done and done well throughout his career, which is facing change and putting in new hires at new positions. This is the most change he's had in any offseason. You've had 4 new coaches, 1 not by your choice, 3 that were. So being able to have, you only have 10 on-field assistants, that amount of turnover from staff year by year, that has not been a recipe for success under Beamer. And we'll find out if it is this year, because it has to be. But Losing 4 is one thing. Losing him as a 5th would have been a nightmare of a scenario, if we're being honest. All right, we are going to come back from a quick break. I'm going to try not to fumble over any more words, and we're going to talk about another happy thing in the world of Gamecocks athletics, and that's another win in basketball as the Gamecocks improved to 9-4 and exit non-conference play before the SEC play begins this weekend. We'll be right back with the last part of today's episode. All right. Final part of today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We brought this up on yesterday's episode, and I don't know if everybody's in the NBA. I'm admittedly, I get into All-Star Weekend because I like the dunk contest, three-point contest. That's kind of lost its luster, and I love playoff NBA basketball. But FanDuel is doing something I think is super creative and awesome, and something that I think will, for if you're a casual fan looking for sports like me in the offseason, you are going to love. And that is FanDuel NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday night, before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame. It's a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. That is every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Time. They have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It adds a little bit extra energy to Friday night, and it allows you not to overthink anything because everything is right at your fingertips, and it's all for your convenience. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, closing out our show today with some basketball. And listen, you're playing University of Albany, not a big game, a game you should obviously win. Didn't see much of a struggle. They kind of struggled early with trying to pull away, but it wasn't anything that was overly concerning. I thought they came out of the gates and looked really well. You end up getting a big win, 96-67. Here's what I liked most about what happened. One, you improved to 9-4 in non-conference play, including 9-1 on the road. Love that. Getting the magic number usually for a college basketball team is how can you get to 20 wins if you want to get to the tournament? Now you got your work cut out for you because means you got to go 11-7 in the conference. Is that going to happen? I don't know. You don't have to win 20 games to get in. And remember, I think everyone gets into the SEC tournament now as well. But here's what I liked most. You were finally able to shoot threes at a elite clip, by the way. You're almost 50%, 14 of 30, so you were 47%. Then you also had a onslaught coming out of the gates where you were up 48-33 at the half, putting up nearly 50 points in the first half. We talked about some of the things that plagued this team under Lamont Paris. Slow starts is one of them. You didn't have a slow start today, and you definitely didn't have to take your foot off the gas in the second half. 48 points in the first, 48 points in the second. What was most impressive? How about everybody scoring? You had 3 of the starters in double digits, 5 players overall in double digits. Eli Ellis had 11. Let's see. Hayden Asimian had 13. Michi had 15. Miles Stute had 12. And then Mike, God, I got to learn this name soon. Sheriff James. That's not right. Mike S. Mike S. had 10. But again, I thought you had 2 guys that had 3 3-pointers at least. Hitting 14 of 30 from 3 is not something I think this team is going to do consistently. I think that's the highest 3-point percentage they've had all year. But what they did in the first half, especially, and if you watch the game, you notice this. They moved the ball so well in this game. I mean, they moved the ball tremendously. And you found open guys constantly for 3. And that was what I think led to a lot of these points because you didn't have to fight and feel like you were like really struggling to find open guys and make any kind of effort to score. Now, of course, you're not going to shoot 47% from 3 every game. This team especially won't. But it's nice to know that you are exiting non-conference play going into the teeth of the schedule now in the toughest conference in all of basketball with a 30-point win under your belt and your best shooting performance from deep. There's a lot to like there. Like 9-4, I was hoping you'd have 10 wins exiting non-conference play, but still a lot to like about the win tonight. We'll see what happens going into SEC play this weekend. I'm sure we'll be here to cover it as well. Going to be an exciting weekend. This is not going to be one of those months where we just kind of coast into it with nothing to talk about. There's a lot to talk about with the portal opening up on Friday, and then also basketball season SEC play opening up on Saturday. So we'll make sure to cover it all. Until then, until next time, go Cox.